Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I'm back from a couple of sunny days in Kefalonia, and yes, Tottenham did make a signing while I was on holiday, as you may have noticed. Yves Bissouma, of course, signed up finally. To be honest, as I said in the last video, I knew it was coming, as in I knew it was likely to be announced on one of my days off. So it was only a couple of days. I only had to spend 2 nights out there. It was just a quick break, but Spurs still managed to get a signing over the line while I was away. Thank you very much, Spurs. At least it meant I didn't have to do a load of work in doing it, but as I say, we knew it was coming, so I'd written pretty much everything up I could on it anyway. So there will be, for those who found the last one vaguely interesting, there will be a video about Kefalonia, and more of a travel video, not Spurs related. I should warn you, if you get a notification that says Kefalonia in it, it's not going to be about Tottenham. It's just going to be me chatting away in some very lovely looking places in Kefalonia, which was awesome. I really would recommend it. So yeah, that when I actually get the chance to take a moment to breathe and sit down, I will edit that and get that out there. But yeah, it's all been a bit of a rush. A late night flight back. Didn't get back home till about 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. Starting work at 10 on Sunday. And yeah, back to work for the last couple of days. So getting to the bottom of loads of things that we'll talk about in this video. So let's start with Bissouma. Obviously, we know it's a deal until 2026. What I would say is most Spurs deals pretty much always, barring the odd few, have an option for a further year. Don't know 100% if this one does, but like I say, most of their deals do. The fee, sounds like we're looking at over 30 million and all once if all the add-ons are triggered. I think you're probably looking at far less than that in a basic, more in the 20s. Which, of course, is a very good deal for a player of his quality. And let's be honest, if he triggers all the add-ons that bring the extra money, it means he's probably played very well and done exactly what Spurs needed him to, so it all works out for everyone. What I think is a key thing about the Bissouma signing is they're not signing a kid. They're not signing someone with potential. They are signing a player who is approaching his prime very soon. He'll be 26, not too long. He is, probably fair to say, one of the best midfielders outside the traditional top 6. He's going to be absolutely superb for Tottenham from everything I'm hearing. And I think the key thing about this deal is this is something that Conte has been trying to impress on the squad and the club, on everything, that he just wants to drill out of Tottenham this mentality that there's a set starting 11. That's not how big clubs think. Big clubs, they think there's a squad full of players, all of equal abilities, or at least similar abilities, all pushing each other to try and be in that team. Anyone's ready to step in at a moment's notice, and it doesn't affect the quality of the team or the tactical options that Conte has at his disposal. I mentioned this before, didn't I, about the fact that last season he looked at that bench on most occasions and was like, yeah, okay, I'm not really going to be able to change this game too much from that. And that's what he wants to get rid of. Tottenham need to start thinking about a big club, and that's what this deal does represent, because even taking Harry Winks out of the, factoring him in because we think very likely to leave for some regular football. No, Everton are very interested among other clubs, but that still leaves you Bissouma, Rodrigo Bentancur, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who I'm told Spurs have no plans to sell this summer, and of course young Oliver Skipp, who I have spoken plenty about. So that is a hell of a four, a quartet in that midfield, when, let's be honest, on the whole it's going to be a 2 most of the time, and even I think if it is a 3 in midfield, it's unlikely to be 3 from that 4. I think it'll be another attacking midfield, and we'll talk about that. And sadly, someone who probably isn't going to be involved in that discussion at the moment, it doesn't look like anyway. But also, Pape Matar Sarr has to come in. Conte has to look at him this summer and work out what happens with him next. So I'd say in that central midfield, incredible options now. You think about how good Bentancur and Højbjerg were in some of those big games as this season kind of hit the business end. You could add Bissouma's terrific quality to that as well. And Oliver Skipp, obviously, is an incredible young talent who everyone has high hopes for. That's a hell of a quartet, and that is exactly what I'm saying and what Conte is saying. It's about an incredible squad, not just a starting 11 you can be pleased about. And that's really cool. I mean, what I did today, I spoke to Richie Mills, who is the Brighton reporter for Sussex Live. He covers Brighton week in, week out. He has watched Bissouma every single week, home and away, for the recent seasons. So I asked him a couple of questions about what we can expect from Bissouma, because obviously, probably like me, most of you have seen him in kind of glimpses of him, little matches you've seen him play, especially against Spurs. But what is he like on a consistent week in, week out basis? So I asked him kind of, first off, what can we expect? And he said, Spurs fans can expect one of the best ball winners in the game, a marauding and athletic midfielder who can go box to box, and he is capable of the odd wonder goal. He's predominantly right-footed, favours shorter passes over long ones, and is very competent at driving out from the back to kickstart an attack. His dribbling and close ball controls come on leaps and bounds too. When he joined Brighton in 2018, he showed flashes of brilliance, but he was inconsistent. Now he rarely has a bad game. So, of course, I asked him what are his weaknesses as well. He said, because of the defensive part of his game is so good, some of his deficiencies are not such a big issue. If he could iron those out, he will be world class. His shot success is pretty low, his long-range passing could be worked on, and he does tend to pick up too many yellow cards. He picked up 10 bookings over the course of last season, meaning he missed 3 matches overall. Graham Potter said that's one part of his game Brighton want to work on, but it could be something on a double-edged sword because he obviously also has that. It gives him that aggression in the tackle, that drive, and that's exactly one of the key elements of his game. And I suppose it's very similar, I guess, with Spurs to Christian Romero, that front foot defending style. So, yeah, but I guess if he does miss matches, this is where the quality and the strength and depth comes in. I asked him fitness-wise, what's he like? Because obviously with Spurs and Conte, there's going to be this huge fitness level required, and Conte will work him absolutely ridiculously over the summer. To which Richie said, fitness-wise, Bissouma proved to be one of Brighton's fittest players. It was very rare to see him out on his feet, and often he was the figure who would spearhead his side's efforts to get them back into a game or take it to the opposition. Some of his games over the past 2 seasons have been phenomenal. So this is all very high praise and very exciting. So I asked him also, how does he work with others, fellow teammates? Is he popular in the dressing room? Stuff like that. To which he said, towards the back end of last season, he formed a great partnership with his Brighton teammate Moses Caicedo. They were exceptional in the 1-0 win over Tottenham last year, with the pair acting as a sort of double act. Sorry, last season, not last year. When one got forward, the other covered, and vice versa. Bissouma was a fan favourite with the Seagulls, and his teammates love him. Brighton's kitman Alex Burrows had this to say about him in 2020. The lads always pop in and ask for bits and pieces too. They're a great group. I have to say that Yves Bissouma is one of the funniest people I've met. He'll be in the office just chatting to someone in French on FaceTime, then he'll switch it to me and back again. He's a great laugh. So that's what you want. You need good, you need characters. You need people that are going to gel with the other team, because that's other teammates. Because that's the interesting thing for Bissouma now is he probably became a bit of a bigger fish in the Brighton pond, and now he'll be coming to Tottenham where, there's some big star players in that squad, and players that he's going to really have to fight for his spot in the team. And how he reacts and how he develops and how he deals with all that is going to be crucial. Obviously, we've got his own comments since he made the move. He said, I'm very happy to be here, happy to be a Spurs player, and hopefully we're going to have a good season. I'm going to give everything to try to win every game to stay at the top, but as everyone knows, the Premier League is not easy. We're going to have to work really hard to keep the ambition high. We have a good group and a great coach. Everyone knows him. I know I can pass this step with him. I know he will help me more to be what I want to be and try to help the team as well. I'm very happy to play with him. It's my dream to play Champions League. I remember when I was younger, I watched the Champions League every day. I can't believe I'm going to play Champions League with Spurs. I'm so happy. I just want to say thank you to my mum, my dad, and my agent here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Spurs as well. And just a little bit on his background and where he came from. He said, I was born in the Ivory Coast in my dad's village. When I was young, football was my life. I wanted to play football every day, every moment. If I don't play football, I'm not happy. To be a professional footballer, to be at Spurs, a big club when I remember 11, 12 years ago, it gives me some sensations. My mum, my dad, they helped me a lot. It was really hard. In Africa, we don't have the opportunities like here. For example, when I was younger, my dad, my mum, they just worked to help us. But if you want to play football, they don't have the money to buy a ball or shoes. We just played on the street with friends, no shoes. But we enjoyed this moment. I was young, my friends as well. It's one part of life. I was happy. I've come so far, from Isia to Spurs, Champions League music. Imagine. The emotion is too much. So, of course, saying all the right things. And I do think he is going to be a huge player for Spurs. It's the kind of... I'd say it's a statement signing. I actually saw, just as I was about to do this, someone was saying on Twitter, "Oh, come on Spurs, they haven't even spent on any of the £150 million yet." And I was thinking, it's been a brilliant window so far. It's been so good. They've signed 3 really key players in different positions. Obviously, Forster's more of a backup, but Perisic and Bissouma, they're terrific. And I do think Bissouma's a statement signing just because they managed to get him for, around what will be over 30 million. That's not to say that if he had more than 1 year left on his contract, you'd be talking probably about £50, £60 million player. That's how good he is. Look, there's loads more to come from Tottenham as well. This isn't it. This is just getting the ones that they can get lined up quickly through the door. What I should say, as I said before, when we're talking about ongoing police investigations as well that have restricted as a journalist and what I can say and what I can report on and things like that because of the reporting rules and regulations. All I'd say again on that is check my articles that I've written about anything to do with staff. Got a statement from Sussex Police about an incident that happened in a Brighton nightclub. I'd read that carefully if you're thinking or wanting to ask me various questions about any ongoing police investigations, because that's in that. So that's a separate thing that obviously I can't really go into, but I would read that statement if I were you. So, moving on. What next for Tottenham? As I just alluded to, more signings to come. I think we have to talk about Christian Eriksen. Because, for those, including myself, who would like to see Christian Eriksen back at Tottenham, I've been doing a bit of digging on both sides of that potential deal today. And it kind of it seems like Spurs have gone cold on it. And for whatever reason that is, we'll discuss that as we talk about the kind of details and what I know. So it seems like, I know that at this current time, they haven't followed up on initial interest shown. And certainly those from the Spurs side are really distancing themselves. Those that I've spoken to inside Spurs are distancing themselves with regard to any discussions going on about Christian Eriksen whatsoever right now. And from the other side of things, people I've spoken to on that side, they're saying that Spurs were in contact about 2 weeks ago over Eriksen with his camp about a potential return, but just haven't followed that up since. That's kind of left it where it was then. And he's a man in demand. I'm told that Manchester United, Everton, Newcastle, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford have all made contact, as well as Ajax and one unnamed La Liga club. Don't know who that La Liga club is. I do wonder, this is purely guessing, this is with no information whatsoever, I just wonder whether someone like Barcelona, maybe, because of their cash issues, would look at someone, a free transfer like that, and think, I don't know. Again, for any of the aggregator accounts say Barcelona, as Alistair Gould says, Barcelona are interested. I'm not. I don't know who that La Liga club is. I just know there is a La Liga club interested in him, or have made contact about signing him. And I just wonder if that makes sense. Maybe there's others, of course, that would be. And also the whole London side of things, his family is quite settled in London, or very settled in London. Obviously, they lived there for years. And there was a lot of talk that he was keen, if possible, to remain in London. But from what I understand now, is because there's so many options on the table now for him, and so many different places he could go, and so many different opportunities, that's no longer a primary driving force behind it. Any potential move, it'll be weighed all up. And And yeah, from what I understand, has made no decision yet. Eriksen, he's away on a holiday now after his international duty. No decision has been made. So yeah, anyone saying he's close to this or that, not at this moment in time. He's got to weigh it all up. Like I say, a lot of things to think about. I find just the whole Spurs side of things really interesting because Conte quite clearly during the season said that he'd like to sign him and bring him back to Tottenham. I know Paratici likes him because I know that he tried to sign him when he was at Juventus. If you maybe remember, Morata and Paratici worked together at Juventus, and Morata went to Inter and tried to sign him from Spurs, and obviously ultimately did. And at the same time, Paratici was trying to get him for Juventus. And then later, when he was struggling a little bit to adapt to begin with at Inter, I know that Spurs tried to sign him again on loan to bring him back, but that wasn't able to happen at the time. So Spurs, Paratici and Conte have all wanted Eriksen at one point, and I can't get my head around exactly why they've gone cold at the moment on him. Purely speculating, maybe they feel that his preference lies elsewhere. Maybe it's to do with what they think he's asking for, whether it's a salary or whether it even is the amount of years that he wants to sign on for. I don't know. With Spurs have in the past had a thing with players over 30 where they would often just do 2-year deals, but they have broken that on occasions. I mean, Moussa Sissoko got a longer deal. Alderweireld got a longer deal. Hugo Lloris is technically, was it 2.5 years? So his was over that. So it's not something that they've been kept to since then. So yeah, I just find it weird. And the fact that Conte, I've seen people saying, oh, but Conte never played him at Inter. He did. In the second half of the title-winning season, he played him a lot. He started almost every game, certainly the bulk of the games in the second half of the season. Either on the left or in the centre of a midfield three, which is exactly where he'd play him for Tottenham. And it's a really strange one because I get the impression from the Eriksen side of things, from people who know him and within his camp and stuff, there's a little bit of surprise at the stance that Spurs have taken as well. I'm not entirely sure where that's come from, but it's quite a clear message coming out from everyone of us within Spurs is that no discussions there. So whether it's something that they do suddenly resurrect at the last moment, I don't know. But at the moment, certainly they haven't followed up their interest, their initial contact. Like I say, last contact was 2 months ago, and 2 weeks ago. Make that clear, 2 weeks ago, and nothing since then. Maybe we'll find out the exact reasoning behind that. And exactly why, because it is a strange one. I haven't been able to get a reason on it at all. So in terms of what happens now, in terms of other people, obviously Eriksen ticked a lot of boxes for Conte to be able to switch to a 3-5-2. I mean, Kulusevski can play in a deeper central role in a 3-5-2 if required. Obviously, I've said before that Spurs have looked at Yuri Tielemans. He's a long-time target for them. But a lot of talk about Arsenal with him, and obviously would be a reasonably big fee for him, although I think he is coming towards the end of his contract as well. I think it might be in the last year. I've said previously as well about Lucas Paqueta, Lyon's Brazilian international, who Newcastle very seriously have been looking at and tried to sign him earlier this year. He technically, I think the best way to describe him is versatile. He can play an attacking midfield role. In that central role, he can play on the right. He can also play up front if needed as well. I mean, he scored 11 goals and laid on 7 assists for Lyon, who struggled a bit last season as well. So he is clearly a good player. I don't know value-wise what you're looking at with him. I'm trying to think contract-wise whether he's in the last 2 years or not. I can't remember with him. But certainly he is a player that Spurs is a player of interest to Spurs. So perhaps he could end up being an Eriksen replacement on that list of potentials. James Maddison, of course, as well. James Maddison is a homegrown one. I think he'd be more difficult, although yes, his contract is in the last 2 years, but that we know that doesn't whack down the contract too much. But certainly he's a player. I think they will keep an eye on his situation. I mean, I've also seen people saying that he's not been particularly great. I mean, I looked up his numbers: 18 goals and 12 assists last season for Leicester. He had a really good season. And Spurs are still looking for homegrown players as well. So it's not really a case of just looking at these foreign players and these excitingly named players. They do have to look at the homegrown ones as well. Who else Spurs looked at homegrown wise? Obviously. Oh my God, his name's gone completely out of my head. Jesse Lingard. Jesse Lingard as well. I know in January they had a little chat with his representatives about a move. So I get the impression that Spurs maybe aren't going to be top dogs for him in terms of he'll want to play regularly week in, week out. I don't think he'd get that at Spurs. Seems to be more talk of maybe him going abroad or even West Ham. But although it'd be interesting that West Ham, like I say, was one of the names that contacted Eriksen's camp about bringing him there. So, yeah, there's a lot of names out there, and there will be far more names that come into it as well. Like I said, the way Paratici works, there'll be so many different players sounded out. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that, because Conte definitely needs an option in that position, and it's a type of player in Spurs squad they don't have. With Bissouma's arrival, they've kind of stocked up on more on the engine room central midfielders, but in terms of an attacking central midfielder, a bit of a playmaker, there's less of those. And I know some people say Conte doesn't really play with them. He kind of does, especially when he wants to go 3-5-2. And when I mean playmaker, it's more someone that can just pick out those passes. And I think all of the players currently there can do that, but it's not their top skill set. Other developments, no developments on Jed Spence as of yet. Is really another one to keep an eye on, because definitely I know people within his camp were expecting some developments last week, which didn't really come. As I said before, it seems like Jed Spence does favour a move to Spurs with the attraction of Champions League football and the fact that he would get a fair bit of game time with Spurs as well. And I just wonder, again, this is me guessing and speculating, I do wonder whether we're seeing one of those age-old scenarios where Spurs, how do I put this in a polite way? Sometimes when they have these players that they believe want them and as their first choice, they will hang around a little, make the selling club sweat a bit, try to get that price down a bit, and then bring in the player, or try to bring in the player when they feel that the selling club are ripe to give him away. Not give him away, but for less. I just wonder whether that's what's happening with the Spence scenario. This is purely speculation. It's worked sometimes in the past. Sometimes it's paid off for them, and they've managed to get players for far better deals. Sometimes it really hasn't, and it's gone hideously wrong. And I really hope this isn't one of these scenarios, because, as I've said before, a lot of interested parties in Jed Spence. The likes of Dortmund and Roma and Newcastle and Brentford again, and Forest, of course, as well. So, yeah, I don't know whether this is one that Spurs can afford to muck around on or not. I mean, the price tag that we keep hearing, it's over 20 million. I guess if I'm Spurs, maybe I'm looking at that and thinking, it's had one real breakout season and it was in the Championship. Do you pay over £20 million for a player without Premier League experience? I get that, and maybe that's part of the thinking. But essentially, if that's what Borough are looking for him, and another club is willing to get nearer that price, then it might force Spurs into action. But if they don't, perhaps that's why we're seeing this little standoff now at the moment and no official bid going in. Obviously, that can change at any moment. By the time I've finished this video, that may have changed. But at the moment, no developments, it seems, with him. Obviously, centre-backs we know are a priority. Really interesting to see what happens with the Alessandro Bastoni stuff, because like we say, we've said it a million times, obviously he wants to stay at Inter. That's kind of his priority, what he'd like to do, and Inter have made it clear to his people that he's not going anywhere. But then, as I said previously, there's still this little door ajar, because it's not a little door, the door is still a little ajar, because they need to sell players. And we've said this repeatedly, and it still stands, because, I mean, even Giuseppe Moratto, who I was talking about earlier, the CEO of Inter, he said to one of the radio stations out in Inter, it's certainly easier to replace a centre-back than a striker. Probably we will be forced to sell someone in that position. I should stress, he was being asked about Milan Skriniar and a potential move to PSG when he was asked that question. But I just thought it was quite interesting that his answer wasn't specific. He didn't mention Skriniar's name. And, and obviously that Skriniar deal has not gone through at this point. And, Inter have got big plans, especially up front. They're looking to sign Lukaku and Dybala. Morata has admitted that. Both of them they've been in talks for. Looks like Lukaku, they're trying to get a loan deal for him, although quite an expensive one. I think latest talks that Chelsea want them to take on the full amount of his wages and 10 million for the loan itself. So doing that, and obviously Dybala, although a free agent, wage-wise is going to be big. So I just wonder whether Spurs are just saying, let's wait a moment here. Bastoni, as I said before, with Gvardiol was one of their two top choices for this left-sided centre-back position. Conte and Paratici both love him. And maybe they're thinking, do Inter get a little bit desperate here? Do we get to a point where maybe they have to look at the fact that we can get a decent bid from Tottenham for Bastoni, whereas with Skriniar, maybe they feel they're not going to get as much. We'll see. Obviously, we know the other names mentioned. I've said them a million times recently, and I am intrigued to see what happens with Gleison Bremer, because obviously Inter want him, but if they don't have the finances to get that deal through, do Spurs nip in there? I mean, he's more of a right-sided central centre-back for a back three than the left. But, like I've said, Spurs are looking for two centre-backs, especially with Joe Rodon likely to head off for regular football, whether that's on loan or permanently. No developments with him, by the way, Joe Rodon, from what I understand at the moment. I do just wonder with him, with Steve Cooper and Forrest come in for him, and I think that'd be a really good fit. Obviously, Cooper managed him at Swansea, wasn't it? But in terms of Bremer, I wonder that. And I keep hearing from various people. I said this before about Spurs being interested in the Ukrainian 19-year-old Ilya Zabany, a very talented teenager, and one that people think is going to be a big player in the game as he gets older. And I just wonder where that's. I think he's one to keep an eye on. I really do. Because he can play on either side of the defence in a back three as well. Obviously, he is a player for now, but also more so for the future. But I wonder if Joe Rodon is moving on, maybe he's the kind of player that pushes quite quickly to try and be in that team as well. And I think there's a sense with him, certainly from a few clubs that are maybe keeping an eye on a situation, that he could, in a year or two, be worth huge figures. He's very calm, very collected, very clever player. And I just wonder whether he's a signing that ticks a lot of boxes for Spurs. So keep an eye on that one. And obviously, it's awful to say it because of obviously there's such bigger things going on with everything that is happening in Ukraine as well. But as a side effect and purely in a football terms, it does create this uncertainty in what happens. I think he's a Dynamo Kiev player. So obviously what happens exactly there? Well, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the Ukrainian league and how that affects the players and whether cash-wise, money-wise, they must be having terrible issues as well. So I don't really know how that all works and whether that makes the situations for a lot of Ukrainian players a difficult one and what they do next. So yeah, keep an eye on that situation, see whether anything develops with that one. In terms of strikers, obviously, I've said before that Spurs are interested in Gabriel Jesus, and I'm sure they will have certainly made their interest very clear to him and City, or his representatives and City. Just you kind of feel like Arsenal were in the driving seat there with the Arteta link, obviously knowing him very well, and just purely the fact I think he starts every single game pretty much for Arsenal, whereas at Spurs, I still think he's in a rotation role, which, again, I know that's what Conte wants us to know, that everyone should be in a rotation role, but I do think naturally he's going to get slightly less game time. And do you know what? I think we should really be keeping an eye on the Lautaro Martinez situation. I do think we should. You know, like I've just said, into trying to sign Lukaku and Dybala, is Lautaro Martinez going to be the odd man out? It may well be that they're going to try and find some way to play all three, because we know Martinez can play out wide if required as well. But if, again, Inter are looking for money, and we know Conte likes him, and we know Paratici likes him as well, and we know that Spurs tried to sign him last year, but unfortunately couldn't push it through because Inter then sold Lukaku and couldn't sell both. Obviously, he signed a new contract not long after that, but if he's immediately being usurped, because you don't bring Lukaku and Dybala in and not really play them very much. Although obviously Lautaro Martinez and Lukaku had a terrific partnership in the Serie A winning season, so I'd be intrigued to see how Inter play that. And I know Spurs will certainly be sniffing around that situation because it could be a scenario where they can get in there and surely try again. So yeah, keep an eye on him. And there'll be other strikers. Like I said, I've given you all the names of the list of names before that they like, but I just wonder whether, if they can't get a big first choice name like either Jesus or Martinez, whether they look to a younger player that can play a more backup role. I think I mentioned last week that for me, someone like Brereton Diaz would be a good signing. The Blackburn Chile international, who is actually homegrown and had a terrific season championship. For me, I think that makes sense as a player to come in and challenge and start to really learn and progress and stuff like that. I'm not saying Spurs are going to make a move for him in any way. I know that there's been a little bit of contact in the past for him, but yeah, I just wonder whether we're going to end up with a left field name, someone like that comes out of the woodwork if they can't get these bigger names, because maybe that's a role where they feel that if they can't get a guaranteed boom big level player, they get a more younger name who can push in that position. Wingers, we're going to probably need a winger to replace Steven Bergwijn, obviously. Likely to head off to Ajax when Ajax do stump up the cash for him. Like I said it a million times, they are going to have to get much closer to the 27 million that Spurs bought him from PSV for. So, yeah, any ideas that they're going to get him on the cheap is unlikely to happen. But once they do, and let's be honest, it's probably likely to happen at some point. Spurs we've seen the names. You've heard me talk about them, the Richarlisons, the Rafinha, the Alan Saint-Maximin. And I'd imagine Adama Traore's name will come back into the question as well. There's obviously talk about the Ajax chap Anthony as well, with Spurs talking to Ajax about what's going on with Bergwijn. I'm sure his name will have come up, and he can play as a winger/striker. That's what I said when I talk about the winger/striker role. Do they combine it? I've said this before. Conte has always talked about his forward being a focal point number 9. But do they also look at potential options of players that can do both roles? He would always say that Steven Bergwijn he saw as being able to do that role, despite the fact he's not the tallest chap. So could potentially Paratici and Conte decide maybe we look at that and we see a dual purpose chap and bring him in to do both roles for you? Could be, and at a push, Perisic can play up there as well, and Kulusevski has played up there as well. So, yeah, I'm going to keep saying the word interesting because that's how I'm finding this transfer window. I'm intrigued to see exactly how they play certain scenarios. We know the positions they want players in, and we know a lot of the names, but also there's an element of can they be clever and combine some of them so that they can put more money towards other big name signings in other positions. So, yeah, See what happens with that. What else we got? In terms of young players, Alfie Devine, Dane Scarlett have both been playing for England under-19s at the European Under-19 Championships. They kicked that off yesterday. I watched a fair chunk of that game, and then I had to pop out, so I actually had to watch back on highlights the latest latter stages. But I certainly saw Dane Scarlett show some clever movement, get a good assist. It was against their opening game was against Austria. Dane Scarlett, got out wide on the left-hand side, cut the ball back inside for an assist, which was very good. He also hit the left-hand post a little bit later after there was a bit of a mistake in the Austrian back line and the ball was worked to him. He probably should have scored. I'd say he'd probably be disappointed not to score, but it was a good low strike, but just unfortunately hit the post and bounced back out. And Alfie Devine, this was one of the bits unfortunately I had to come back and watch later on, scored a cracker for the second goal. There was a lovely run. I can't remember the player did it. It was a lovely little turn inside and run, and then he passed inside to Devine, who beautiful slice shot into the top right corner. Lovely goal. And those two players, they're going to have a big tournament. I really believe that. Alfie Devine is just developing like leaps and bounds. And like I've said before, I think we'll probably see loan moves for both of them to continue their development. I'm intrigued to see how it works kind of pre-season wise, because obviously they're going to be playing their internationals a lot later. Obviously they've had a little bit of a break before, although I know certainly Dane Scarlett was doing some of these. A lot of the players go off and do these performance training things. If you follow them on Instagram, you'll have seen it. They go out with their specialist coaches to various warm weather training camps. Essentially, it's almost like combining a holiday in their evenings with daytime work. And I know Dane Scarlett did that. I wouldn't be shocked if Alfie Devine did similar. I certainly know Ryan Sessegnon has been putting a hell of a lot of work in. Troy Parrott the same since he's left the Ireland camp. All ready for this big season to come. And I just wonder, though, with Dane and Alfie, how it's going to work with their return to pre-season. Whether the fact that they got the little break before will be taken into account, and then they'll come back quite quickly. Because, both those players you'd want to see on the career tour, unless they get a loan before that. But I just wonder whether their internationals going on longer with this tournament, whether they're actually back in time for that or not. We'll find out. We shall see. If I find out any more on that. The other thing I was going to say about youth football as well is there's been a little bit of a change there. The Premier League 2, if you're not aware, that's the competition that the previously under 23s played. Some might see it as a reserve squad. It's not really nowadays. It's more of a youth squad. There's no older players within that. But that has actually changed now. It's not going to be under 23s anymore. It's going to be under 21s, which is obviously an attempt to bring more young players through. And it will obviously change the makeup of those teams. What I would say, there is going to be the transition from under 23s to under 21s has mean that rather than having 3 overage players, they are going to allow 5 overage players and the goalkeeper to be a bit older for a match, which obviously means that your older academy players. Because I saw that announcement, I was a bit like, oh wow, because the Premier League announced it a couple of days back, and I wondered, how does that affect the older players in Spurs Academy, the likes of Jamie Bowdens, Harvey White, Jack Clark before he heads off on his loan and likely loan, and those older players, because Spurs often have a few players that they keep around, the 22-year-olds and players like that. And although saying that, I think Harvey White might still be 20 anyway. I've probably done him a disservice there, thinking he's a bit older. But yeah, but obviously with a few overage players, they can still play in that as well. Be intrigued to see how that changes things, if in any way. Just the younger players on the whole, I'm intrigued to see how Conte uses them next season, because he's going to have a bigger senior squad, but he's also going to need bigger squads in general anyway, because apart from the fact that obviously they still need 9 subs on the bench, but will have 5 subs be able to come on, Champions League is 12 subs on the bench. That's a big bench. So if you've got any injuries or absences from the first team squad, let's say, what's that? That's 23 players in your Champions League matchday squad. So if you've got any injuries or absences, those young players are going to have to come in. And if the likes of Scarlett and Devine head off on loan, and maybe White and Bowden too, and players like that, are you then looking below that? Are you looking to someone like, let's say, Jamie Donnelly, who's a very talented young striker? Has represented Northern Ireland, I think it is, and England at under 17 level, I think it is. I think he's only 17 at the moment, but high hopes for him. Does he then come into squad? It's going to be really fascinating to see exactly what happens with those. So I think that's everything in terms of kind of housekeeping, in terms of all the things I wanted to cover. So I'm going to try and do a couple of questions that were asked in underneath the last video, just to try and do those. I will do a proper full Q&A again at some point, but so many little things are happening. I'm getting so many little. I just literally came back from holiday, like I say, late night on Saturday, and over the next 2 days, I'm just getting these little bits and pieces of information that have changed loads of scenarios, like the Eriksen one as well. So I want to update you on all of that, and it's actually leaving not too long for Q&A little bits and pieces. So what we got here? Alex Benfield asks, a question for you. Would you be willing to go on the Athletics podcast, The View from the Lane, with Charlie? I think you and them would be glorious for insight. Charlie Eccleshare is a terrific journalist. I know him very well. Works for the Athletic. Yeah, of course. I'll be honest, I don't do many other podcasts and YouTube channels, things like that. And the only real reason for that is it's time. It's just a time thing. As you may be aware, I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I do long days when I'm writing, and then on my days off or after work, like I'm doing today, I will then do these videos because for some reason people seem to quite like them. Not everyone, but some people. So yeah, in terms of time-wise, I must admit I turn down a lot of stuff like that. People very kindly ask me to do, whether it's YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff. It's very rare that I do them, just purely because I need to spend time with my family. I need to spend any spare time I get with them, really. The ones I do the last word on Spurs. I normally do that about twice a season. I always kind of commit to them because they're a nice bunch of chaps, and I do enjoy doing that, and I feel that, I want to kind of just commit to that at least twice a season. That's not to say everyone else isn't very nice, but just historically that was one I did way back in the day, and I tried to keep up that little commitment with them. And I did a really fun one just on a whim a couple of weeks back, was it? Where these two young lads, because I thought it was different. These two lads and their dad were going to interview me, mainly about my job, really, which I do enjoy, kind of talking a little bit of a different side of things and doing that sort of stuff. I did that. That was good fun. And way back with Flav from the Fighting Cock, I did an interview with him, just again a similar thing, just talking about kind of, I guess, what I do and my job, and maybe giving a little bit of insight into that side of things, because ultimately, I guess I talk and write all day about Tottenham Hotspur. So maybe that's another side of it. The prospect of going to talk about it again on another format with other people, probably, as well as, like I say, taking me away from my family and spare time, it's probably not that appealing to me, because it's doing it again. I already write about it. I already do these videos, have my podcast every single week, Golden Guest Talk Tottenham, with Guesty, my good friend and colleague. So I think then doing it again for other stuff, it kind of has to be something a little bit different to entice me, as it were. It's just not making out that I'm some major type, that it's a coup if you get me, or any rubbish like that. It's just purely that, just on a personal level. If I'm just going to go and talk about Tottenham and transfers, and it's a bit like, I've done that a million times this week. But like I say, Charlie's fantastic. I really, really like Charlie. He's a lovely guy, and a very, very good journalist as well. And I think we're both heading out to Korea on the tour, which will be my first tour away with Charlie. So that I'm sure will be really good fun as well. What other questions we got here? We've got... And Kyriakidis asks, do you have any inkling of the next possible signing Parachi is currently striving for, a surprise name other than the usual suspects from any rumours from the TFC corridors of power? Well, I guess if it's a surprise signing, that's probably... I probably wouldn't know if it's a surprise. I mean, even the Bissouma stuff, I said to you, was it a week or two before it happened that I knew Spurs were looking at him and he was one of the names on the list. But then, boom, that suddenly moved really quickly. So, yeah, like I say, the young Ukrainian lad, I would keep a little eye on him, Zabarnyi, because I do wonder, even if it's not Spurs, whether someone suddenly comes in for him. But I do know that Spurs are having a really good look at him as a potential signing. So maybe he's the one. I don't think anyone else has reported that apart from me. That was a weird voice. I'm sorry for doing it. I don't think so. So I guess if that was a surprise one, maybe that would be one. But yeah, it's a bit difficult to say a surprise signing because that's kind of the surprise element. And there will be players like that, absolutely, because it's a really interesting dynamic. Is that obviously you guys want the media to know everything and every single possible potential signing, but on the flip side, you kind of don't want us to know, because if we report every single thing that's happening, it makes it even more difficult for the club to kind of work under the radar to bring someone in, and then it will be too late for other clubs to come in and compete. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I understand everyone wants the latest information, everything, and we get as much as we can. Like I've said before, the network of contacts that we have to talk to on every side, on players, camps, agents, managers, friends, family, and in the clubs themselves, the selling clubs, the buying club, and all of that as well. But yet still, the clubs will try to keep these things under wraps as much as they can, and I understand that. So, yeah, I was about to say it's a difficult job. It's not a difficult job in terms of anything manually, not working down a mine, and I'm not working at the front line in the medical profession, the NHS or anything like that. But it's, it can be tricky in transfers when you're trying to get information on stuff that's being kept quite secret in certain circumstances for a reason. Steve McCallum asks, any chance Spurs sell Højbjerg to Roma and get McKennie from Juventus now Pogba is going there? Right, well, as I said at the top of this, Højbjerg told Spurs have got no plans to sell him. I think Roma has just signed Matic anyway, so I'm not entirely sure why they'd need him as well. McKennie, I will say this every single time, Prachi, a huge fan of McKennie, wanted him at the top of his January midfield transfer list, had him above Bentancur but couldn't get him. I think if Spurs were to lose any more than Winks, I do think seriously they would look at McKennie. I think they would be hopefully at the front of the queue for him as well. And I do wonder how the Pogba situation is going to impact him. But I think with Bissouma coming in, who I've said before, I very much feel like it's like a Conte-driven one as well. I do wonder whether McKennie would be a priority anymore or not. I think we're still looking really at a couple of centre-backs, right wing-back, attacking midfielder in terms of central attacking, and then a winger if Bergwijn goes, which we think he will, and then a striker, which you imagine will be an either-or striker or a striker / winger. So, see what happens on that one as well. Sustainable Shooter asks, one question I have is about selling players. Are Spurs looking to buy all the players they need to first, so Conte has them for pre-season, then look to sell the players they wish later on in the window? That's a really interesting question for the exact reason of it seems to have turned around. The amount of times you've heard me say, Spurs need to sell to buy. I do say that a lot, or I haven't needed to say that a lot because it was always the case. Whereas I do think the £150 million cash injection, I know I've said earlier about some chap on Twitter who said exactly that. Like, we haven't even gone into that £150 million. And I actually think the other thing that £150 million does is actually it cushions Tottenham in terms of those outgoings, in that they can now afford to have, I know we'll look at them as free transfers, but you're also looking at signing on fees and you're also looking at big wages, and things like that, or reasonably big wages. And obviously Bissouma as well, you've got coming in. So to have brought in the 3 transfers with only Cameron Carter-Vickers going out, and that was, I think, 6 million potentially rising to 10 with all future add-ons. So it's not like that's paid for anything really. I think that really points towards that £150 million. It's given that little bit of confidence for like, okay, let's get things done. Conte wanted players in for pre-season, already got 3 of them. Potentially should be more as well. I'd imagine there will be at least 1 or 2 more before they go on the pre-season tour to Korea. Yeah, I think it has changed around this window a lot. I mean, technically, I suppose you could argue in January as well. You know, they tied up Bentancur and Kulusevski, and I think they still would have come in on that final day, even had Ondembele, Lo Celso and Dele not gone out. I think they would have, to be honest, because I think they were so necessary. But yeah, I'd imagine, you know, the likely suspects of Lo Celso and Ondembele will head off. And the other players I've mentioned before, including Harry Winks, I think will head off as well. So yeah, it's a different transfer window. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a really good point. What else we got? Kate and Jelly asked about striker. We've spoken about that. John Scriven asks, I wonder who's going to take free kicks in the new season. Surely Sonny has made the biggest case so far, but Bissouma has scored a few too. I would love to see Sonny given a go now. I would, honestly. He scored 2 in a row with Korea in the last few days. And, you know, people might talk about opposition or whatever, although one was it Chile? I think, and I know the friendlies and things like that. However, I don't think that really changes with a free kick who the opposition is. It's about your ability to take a free kick. And I'd like to think Sonny will, you know, especially with the added confidence now of being a golden boot winner, whether he will look to say, well, I'll take a few of these lads. I'll be intrigued to see in Korea whether he steps up and takes a few, because I'd imagine that Korean fans, if he doesn't and he leaves it to others, yeah, I wonder whether that could be a little interesting kind of side subplot of sorts there. So yeah, no, it's a good one. That I do wonder. Right, what else we got here? People suggesting players that Spurs should buy. That's always interesting, as if I have any influence over that whatsoever. I do not. Someone asked me about this before. Matt Doherty and his knee and his fitness. I've got to ask about that. I will. I promise I will. That might be something for me to ask about tomorrow, and maybe I'll do that in the next video. I completely, with all the holiday stuff, that one slipped off of my mind. Another player, people really like to. They really like to suggest players that Spurs should buy, and yeah, I can't do that. Alice French asks, "What's the future with Japhet Tanganga?" So I've said this in the past. I think it still seems to be the case. Japhet will be back from his knee injury for pre-season. He's expected to be used heavily in pre-season. Conte is going to really give him a workout. Obviously, as I said before, used him a lot in the games before his injury. I think he started something like 8 or 9 out of the 14, 15 games that before he got injured that Conte was in charge for, albeit because there were injuries. And then I think Spurs are going to sit down, look at the situation a bit later in the window and decide whether he's going to be required in terms of the squad or whether he can go out maybe on a loan, because he's versatile. You know, he can play anywhere in that back three, really. So I can understand from Spurs' side of things why they might not want to let him go. But I do think development-wise, he needs it. He really does. Michael Trupp asks, haven't heard much of Maxim Pascotti for a while. Is he likely to go out on loan? Yeah, an interesting one with him. Obviously, had a bit of a breakthrough, not only for, is it Lithuania he plays for? I think it is. I'm sure you'll correct me in the comments if it's wrong. I don't know. Is it Lithuania? Oh, that's going out of brain. But anyway, international senior experience he's got. He's become a regular on the international level as well. Played a lot of Nations League games in recent weeks. And then he played, I'm trying to think if he actually made his, I feel like he made his debut under Nuno as well in the Conference League. So, yeah, he by well, I think a loan is probably about right for him. But again, is he one of those where Spurs obviously have got... I'm trying to think if he's old enough. He might be too old to play in the UEFA Youth League next season. But is he a player they keep around to step on his under-23 development? Because he didn't play in lots of under-23 matches last season. Estonia. That's it. Not Lithuania. I apologise to any Estonians out there. Of course it was Estonia. So yeah, it could well be that they look for a loan for him. But I just wonder whether they keep him around. He's a versatile young man. He can play in centre-back. He can also play at right-back as well. Not probably as a wing-back. I don't think I've seen too much evidence of him being able to play in that role. But certainly, maybe this is the season he pushes on for the under-23s. You know, it's like I say, still only 19. So yeah, see what happens with him. What else have we got in this? Lots of people asking about Pape Matar because I mentioned that someone always does in the comments. So you funny people put a lot of that in the comments. Matthew Thomas asks, I've heard no mentions this year, but do you think Laporte could be a shout for a left centre-back? I haven't heard his name mentioned, but I do wonder it'd be an interesting one if he were to become available, certainly. But I haven't heard his name mentioned at this point. I'm intrigued to see all the Raheem Sterling stuff. You know, Chelsea apparently really going strong for him. Yeah, I know obviously he's been linked with Spurs in the past, mainly because of the Kane stuff. And obviously they're a different club to where they were when the previous Kane stuff last summer. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see how he does at Chelsea. He's an interesting one, Sterling. I watch him sometimes. I think he's an absolute world beater in class. And there's some games you watch him and he kind of looks the opposite. But I do think overall, once he gets his rhythm, I think he's a very good player. People questioning my pronunciation of Ondembele, which is really interesting because he told me how to pronounce his name out in Singapore. So, yeah, but everyone does that. Like I say, Matt Doherty, I have had so many Irish people tell me how to pronounce it in different ways. And they all, because they're Irish, understandably say this is the way you pronounce it. And everyone pretty much has been different. Because I said Doherty, and then someone pointed me towards, in the past, the video he did with Spurs where he actually pronounced his own name for people. I actually can't remember what it was now, but I feel like it was Doherty. I'm going to use Doherty from now on. That's what I'm going to go with. What other questions we got in here? Anthony Gonzalez asks, which player that Spurs are linked to would you sign? That's an interesting one. Who would I sign? I really like the idea of Lautaro Martinez. And I just said that way back. But I do think that's a big player coming in and shaking up things up front and providing competition for a lot of their big players up front. You know, I think he would be a statement signing. I do. In terms of going down to younger things, Zabani, like I say, from everything I'm hearing about him, I think it would be a very interesting young player as well. Talcott Levy asks, Talcott Levy, that's an interesting one. I don't know if there's any relation. If the players are back in 2 weeks and then 9 days later fly to South Korea, then when does the infamous grueling pre-season training take place? It doesn't seem to add up. And in addition, the season starts early, it means there's even less time. Well, I think, like I say, I think a lot of that is why you're seeing a lot of these players doing these intense fitness sessions on their own with their personal coaches. That always happens, but I get the impression they've been really pushing themselves a lot more. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of time there as well. You know, these pre-season trainings, they are happening at Hotspur Way throughout. Before they go to Korea. They will happen after Korea. They will happen in the heat of Korea. I mean, Israel tour is I think they're only away for 3 days. Rangers probably able to fly up the night before and fly back the next night. So there's a solid block there of being able to really put the players through their paces. So I'd counter that. I do think there's a lot of time for that to be done. Yes, I totally agree that there's a 1 week less because of the season starting earlier. Sorry, But I also think did last season finish later as well? It probably balances up in that respect in terms of where their fitness had got to by the time they headed off. Musicuru asks, bit of a weird question, Alistair, but do you reckon we'll sign 4 more players that cost over 20 million? I made a bet with one of my friends that we would sign 6, and now that 2 are down, it's looking worryingly close. Oh, I don't know. It's interesting because, I think you said this in the rest of the question as well. Maybe forgotten the fact that Parachichi loves a free transfer. He does, and loan signings. He likes loan to buy signings as well. So it may well be that some players, there's a potential future fee like Romero and Kulusevski of more than 20 million. But whether it's an initial payment of that is different. I can't really answer that one because of the complex way that they do these deals. Timothy Whitaker says, surprised no mention of Kim Min-jae when discussing potential defenders. Still talking Italian press of him going to either Everton, Napoli or Spurs. I think, as I said in the past with Kim Min-jae, he's a player that Spurs do have some interest in. They've obviously looked at him in previous windows, but from what I understand, he's not high on their list. And if Spurs were to go for him, it would probably mean that a lot of the names above they weren't able to get. But yeah, I understand why he's rated quite highly. A lot of people think he can go on to be a big player. I just don't know whether it'll be Tottenham at this point. Dino Govinda asks, please tell me why everyone besides Spurs lovers just hate Spurs. Journalists, pundits, they're always going to go at some negative spin about anything Spurs related. I don't know about that. I just think it's one of those things where every club feels like the media hates their club. I think it's just the way. And I think there's a lot of fashionable times with clubs. I think there's fashionable managers like Poch. Everyone in the media pretty much, they love Poch. A lot of the pundits loved Poch. A bit like Harry Redknapp, there's that, there's a little bit of affection, I think, for certain managers as well. I don't know. I don't think Spurs are that badly treated in terms of things. It may seem like that to others, maybe because I'm among that bubble. Maybe I don't see it. I don't know. So there you go. I think Avatar 1977 asks, on the fixture list, can we have Manchester City 38 times? I don't think Spurs would win 38 times, but I know where you're coming from because they won both games last season. But I think over the course of 38 matches, that we'd probably be seeing a very, very different result. Although, who knows? With the new look Tottenham, you never know. Aisha asks, any plans for another vacation? There is a vacation to come before the end of the transfer window. Like I say, this trip to Kefalonia was just like a little couple of days. We saw a little cheap deal came up, so we grabbed it. Whereas a many, many times cancelled holiday to Disney World, which was booked 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, which has just been cancelled upon cancelled and cancelled because of everything that's been happening in the world, is finally happening this summer. I'm not going to tell you when. I'm going to leave you in a little bit of suspense on that one. But yeah, let's be honest. Yes, I know that each of the last 3 signings have all happened when I've had days off. People think that, I saw someone saying that he's always on holiday. It's not quite that. I think the actual thing is that signings are made on my days off. So I, as of most people in the world, have 2 days off a week. It's just a weird thing that I think Perisic and Forster were both on days off. Bissouma was while I was actually away for a couple of days. I think Conte was announced while I was on a day off as well, and but I came into work because it was such a big thing. I had to deal with it. Kulusevski and Bentancur, I was working that day. Obviously, it was a transfer deadline day. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where, yeah, it happens a lot, and it definitely is a thing. I've seen some people suggest that Spurs actually adjust their schedule. They don't. They really don't. When they can announce the sign, they will announce them. But like I say, with the Bissouma stuff, it was all done. We were reporting on it before I was heading off. So it's not like these incredible things just happened. Bale and Reguilon. That was another one. Because I remember having to do a video for work in the car park of Sainsbury's while I was off and I was doing a shopping trip with the family. Yes, that was a weird one. I remember having to talk about them in a weird corner of the car park while a gang of youths were looking at me thinking, what a weirdo. But yeah, it does happen. And I get it. And I get the fun around it, which was why I played along with my... If you didn't see my tweet, it was me on the beach at Keflano. Or not so much me, it was the drinks. Well, that was really interesting as well. Because a lot of people were saying... Because what it was a photo of a coffee, or a frappe, as they're called, and a beer. And a lot of people thought that I'd bought both for me. I thought, well, no, I went away with my wife. The coffee was a frappe with Baileys, which was my wife's, and the beer, which was... I can't remember what it was. It was either it would have been an Amstel. Either an Amstel, an Alpha, or... I forgot what their one begins with. Z is Zortha or Zatha. I can't remember what it's called now. It would be one of those. So yeah, interesting. People thought I had a chaser, like I was chasing it down with the coffee. I don't like tea or coffee. I haven't grown up. I'm still a 12-year-old. The only hot drink I like is hot chocolate. So yeah, I just thought that was funny that everyone was assuming there was two drinks that were both mine, not the fact that I actually would have gone on a holiday with someone. Maybe I'm portrayed as such a loner that I do that. That's not to say people that go on holiday on their own are loners. But yeah, right. I'm going to head off because I'm now waffling about drinks and loners and holidays and stuff. Like I say, a little bit of warning that there will hopefully be a Kefalona video coming in the next couple of days. If you have no interest in anything that's not Spurs related, I won't be offended if you swerve it. But if you want to look at a very cool, beautiful part of the world and maybe considering going on holiday there, then it might give you that little bit of a thought about it. I certainly know that the one I did about Sorrento and various parts in Italy earlier in the year had quite a few people saying that they'd decided to go there after that. So, which the Sorrento Tourist Board could have maybe given me a bit of thanks for that one. But yeah, so that one will be heading over in the next couple of days. And of course, I will do a Spurs one in the next few days as well, as long as there's enough. I won't do them unless there's enough interesting new things to talk about. Otherwise, we just end up covering too much old ground, and it's not interesting for you or me. There you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. Time for some dinner, I think. And yeah, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.